So guys, welcome back to something a little bit different here. What I've decided to do today is actually run you guys through a bit of a Sunday update here and a little bit of prep that I do for the week ahead and go over all the things that I look at for how I think price is going to play out over the coming week. And this week we do have Fed week, so on Wednesday there will be FOMC. On top of that, we're going to have a look at the liquidation heat map here, which is going to tell us where liquidity sits. Then we're going to tie this in back to our higher time frame narrative on what we see playing out on the Bitcoin dominance and how things are likely to play out for Bitcoin in this area here, as we have seen another ABC correction, and after weeks of talking about it, perfectly nailing that $114,000 price area. So guys, a lot to cover here in today's video and a lot to learn as well as we deep dive in what we look for here at the start of a trading week and how we actually plan price accordingly. So let's jump into it. First thing we're going to jump in and have a look at is the Bitcoin price chart. And yes, after weeks of talking about it, we actually finally got that C leg correction on Bitcoin down to that $114,000 level that we touched on. I can't actually recall how many times I spoke about this, but eventually it played out. And what I could see on Bitcoin is a small little ABC correction here, finding support around 114. Throughout the weekend, absolutely nothing happened here for Bitcoin. Still waiting for that C leg. As far as Bitcoin performs, I'm not that bothered. Wouldn't surprise me if we do eventually see like a little bit of a C leg to about 114 come in. Anyways, what I see playing out for Bitcoin here in the week ahead, structurally, I'm seeing similarities to the ABC correction we spent 2 months talking about last time, in the fact that we now have came down, had that C leg play out, and what we are seeing is price shoot to the upside, just like we are seeing now. And then price eventually grinds out, meanders through these retracement levels here, and then breaks to the upside. And I wouldn't be surprised to see things actually play out similar here for Bitcoin. Now, if we tie that into the liquidation heat map, we can see that liquidity lies around that $119,000 level and a little bit higher at $120,000. And there are some long liquidations sitting a little bit lower. However, I don't think these are going to get tapped. And I think what's most likely to see happen play out through this week is that these leveraged liquidation levels to the upside are most likely going to get tagged. And then on Wednesday, we do have FOMC, which I could see causing a lot more volatility in the markets, as we are expecting another pause. However, 96% chance here they're going to stay paused, which is actually quite bullish for the markets because we don't want to see rates get cut yet. Every time I've seen rates get cut, that is a pre-indicator of us actually going into a bit of a recession. So as long as they stay paused, things are good. Moving forward for the week, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin does grab liquidity from the upside here. 120,000 doesn't seem too much of a push, maybe 119 even. Likely we see something play out like this, and then I think come FOMC, we will just pull back straight back to where we are right now before forming a bit more of an accumulation and then breaking to the upside and eventually getting out of this range. And I think for this week, this is what I'm kind of looking for. A little bit of sideways and a little bit of chop, which is nothing too exciting and probably not what you want to hear. But I do think for altcoins, while Bitcoin chops around like we experienced last week, I think altcoins are going to perform, push up much higher in comparison to Bitcoin, and then eventually pull back during the back end of the week, like I see actually playing out here for Bitcoin. However, guys, one thing to note is when we did actually see XRP break out from this range, the excitement in this market only lasted 8 days, and so far we've spent an additional 8 days actually correcting. But that's just how things go in crypto. There is a short period of excitement and explosion where you just get to sit back and enjoy it, and then you do go into a little bit more of a corrective stage here. And I think we have found the bottom of that corrective stage, and we've seen the altcoins sell off earlier in the week, and then eventually we actually seen Bitcoin sell off on the Friday, which then ended up leading the dominance to actually sell off a little bit and continue to consolidate in this channel, which if you caught the most previous altcoin video, you'll see that this channel is the way things played out in 2021. And what actually happened back here in 2021 for Bitcoin was once we seen that initial break for the Bitcoin dominance here, things did just chop around and consolidate in here, slowly break to the downside before we then seen the second phase of the alt season, which was the most exciting and explosive phase. There was a slight period of consolidation and where things paused out here, and I think we are in a very similar stage right now where things are just going to pause out for a week or two, and that what will start to form here on Bitcoin is a bit more of an accumulation structure before we can move to the upside, similar to what we did in this zone here. Very boring, very choppy, very sideways, but you can see price moves up, grabs some liquidity from the downside, pulls back to where it starts the week, and then slowly works its way up out of here back to the top of its B range, and that was our signal that things were going to get exciting and break out again from here. So if we do see Bitcoin at any point make it back to this $121,000 region, take out the top of its B wave, we should expect things to get quite exciting here, especially for the rest of the cryptocurrency market. So moving forward, that's how I think things are going to play out here for Bitcoin. And for the altcoins, I think things are going to be a little bit more exciting. I think we're going to see certain coins actually rally. We're starting to see coins like HBAR already make it back to the top of their ranges here. CRV is already poking out, wanting to push from that range and actually break out from this accumulation structure. We're even starting to see SUI edge to the top of that range, find a bit of resistance now. But what we're starting to see is that while Bitcoin has sold off and consolidated and gone into this ABC correction here, select altcoins are breaking out from these long accumulation structures and actually showing strength against the rest of the market. And we also have Binance Coin here, which is another example of a coin that has reached back to its all-time high, rejected, and is showing strength here, especially in the last 12 hours, actually looking like it wants to push higher and break out from this range, all while, again, Bitcoin is just consolidating in this area. However, I think for some coins like XRP, they will form some kind of accumulation structure here before then breaking to the upside. And I think this is how the majority of the altcoin market is going to perform. However, some select altcoins like CRV and HBAR in this time are showing strength and are most likely going to outperform in the short term. Another thing I actually wanted to touch on here is the Google search trends. And what we've seen is that since the 29th of June to the 5th of July area, we've actually seen the search trends pick up for altcoins all the way back to the height they were back in November and December of last year. And this is quite interesting because even if we have a search for Bitcoin here, you can see that the trends haven't really picked up. It's actually starting to decline. However, altcoins have definitely picked up here. Even alt season has 100% picked up the pace here. And what we're starting to see is that a lot of retail is actually coming back to the market, especially the altcoins, and showing interest, which we can see on Google search trends here. On top of that, if we have a look at the funding rate here, what we can see is that the orange here is when funding was really high, which means a lot of people were trading with lots of leverage and the markets were most likely overheated in these times. And the green times is when funding is low and that there isn't much trading going on. And what we can see here is that in the orange during November and December was when the market was the hottest. And since then, we haven't really seen the funding rate increase. However, in a bull market and during an explosive period for altcoins, what you want to see is the orange start to return, and you want to see these funding rates actually creep back up. And what we've seen in the last 2 weeks is you can start to see that Bitcoin still green funding, Ethereum still green on the funding. However, a lot of these altcoins like XRP, Doge, SUI have started to actually flick over orange, and the funding rate is increasing on these coins. So even this funding rate heat map here is showing early signs of an alt season. As you can see, some of these alts are warming back up and the funding rates are increasing, but not for Bitcoin. So again, tying that back into this consolidation here for Bitcoin, while expecting altcoins like BNB, HBAR, SUI, even CRV to break to the upside here. However, as far as things go for the Bitcoin dominance and the rest of the altcoin market, I do think that they will continue to consolidate in this region. As like touched on in previous videos, the excitement phases are very short. They don't last very long. And then the consolidation phases tend to last for much longer. And right now we've seen coins like XRP do a crazy 8-day push. And we've seen the rest of the altcoin market actually take about 13 days here to push up and have this extensive climb. However, even if we look back to 2021 here, you can see that these moves up last about 15 days, roughly 2 weeks, and then stall out again for just a little bit longer, between 2 to 3 weeks, before then seeing price push up again and surge for another 20 days, and then stall out for another 30 days. However, I do believe we are on the move up here, and that this sideways stall out that we're experiencing right now shouldn't be too long, and that eventually we should start to see this Bitcoin dominance actually break down. And I think at the max it'll take 40 days. Something around those 20 days seems much more reasonable to me, and so far we are about a week into this stall out for the dominance, which again all lines up with the theory that for the week ahead we should just grab liquidity from the top side, end up probably closing the week back down at the same price levels we're at now, and that eventually, just like we did back down here in early July, actually break to the upside, shoot out from new highs, and that in this moment when Bitcoin actually breaks out to the upside again and follows this larger pattern that we have here, which is actually the M2 money supply. And what you'll see is that we are looking for that $150,000 Bitcoin, because that's where the M2 is sitting right now. However, I think when Bitcoin actually goes for this push and breaks out to the upside again, whether it follows this accumulation structure, takes a little bit longer, or just simply goes for it now, once we get back past that $121,000 Bitcoin, once we get past that $123,000 level, what we should continue to see is actually altcoin performance. And although Bitcoin should break to the upside, I think the altcoins will outperform much more in this region, just like we've seen in the last couple of weeks here, with the Bitcoin dominance actually dropping while Bitcoin pushed to the upside, just like we've seen here on the Google search trends, where no one's really searching for Bitcoin and everyone's searching for altcoins right now. Even on the funding rate, there is no funding on Bitcoin, but a lot of these other coins are starting to tick over to those orange higher funding levels, which again all lines up with the belief that we are in an alt season here, and that what we're experiencing right now is just a simple period of consolidation before things can rip higher and a bit of a reset across the market. So big week ahead as we go into an FOMC meeting on Wednesday. Still expecting rates to stay paused, which again I think is bullish. And I'm actually going to do a video this week touching on the past and what rate changes actually do to the stock market. And what you'll see in that video is that every time we actually cut rates, sometimes there's a period of pausing. And then when we continue to cut rates again, what we actually start to see is a recession that comes within 3 to 6 months of that. And we'll go over that in a video this week, touching on the stock market and how recessions usually come from rate cuts. So for now, as long as things stay paused, we're happy with that. And for the week ahead, looking for price to play out like this, I do think that these lows will remain intact. And after a week or two of actually calling for that 114K C leg on Bitcoin, we finally do have it. And we've seen a beautiful bounce straight off those levels. So if you guys are new here, feel free to subscribe, leave a like on the video, it helps a lot. If you have any questions, drop them down below in the comments section, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video.